Uh, Good evening, all of you. Uh, Today we have a session on radiology and how to do counseling and examination stations. So our first speaker is none other than Dr. Manoj Agarwal, sir. He is a ENT surgeon and his special interest is in otology and lateral skull base surgery. He did his MBBS and ENT from Calcutta National Medical College. He was a gold medalist throughout. He was awarded Devjani Banerjee Memorial Medal, Ramchandra Sen Memorial Medal, R.N. Roy Chaudhary Gold Medal, and Major K.K. Ghosh Memorial Award. After doing his PG, he went to England for DLO RCS examination under the agencies of Royal College of Surgeons. Later, he went to Professor Mariusana also for 1 year, and during that time, he learned about basics of ear and lateral skull base surgery. And meanwhile, he also published 14 research papers. He is also a recipient of PHR Junior Consultant Award in 2004. Apart from academics, he is a big Bollywood fan. He was the semi-finalist of Bollywood Ka Boss, which was conducted by Boman Irani. He has delivered many lectures and demonstrated ear surgeries at various ENT conferences across India. Currently, he is the director of the Malleus Clinic in Kolkata, India. Personally, I have known Manoj sir since 2015, where we met in Kolkata. Uh, so he is a very good human being. He is very humble, very soft spoken, and very excellent teacher. The way of explaining difficult things is very good. So, and I'm very thankful to you, sir, because you accepted our request on a very short notice. So, I would like to welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
you can start the session, sir.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Pratik. Too many words said there about me. I'm not very sure whether I have reached any such station in my life. I always think of the famous poet, British poet, Robert Frost. And I would like to start with those lines. His wonderful poem that the woods are lovely, dark and deep, and there are promises to keep, miles to go before I sleep. So there's a long, long journey which I still have ahead of me, and I hope to make some difference to this subject by the time I leave. I'm over and done with over here. Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Pratik. Thank you, Dr. Sriharsha, for inviting me. And I hope that this session is equally educative, informative, and more importantly, entertaining as the previous sessions have been. So what I have been asked to cover here is, Dr. Pratik, as I told you over the phone, since I've never taken a DNB exam, so I might not really follow what you want to know. So in case at any point of time you feel that what is being said is not actually in tune with what is needed by our friends over here, just feel free, right?
Correct.
That, so this is something else and this is what we are actually expecting.
Yes, sir.
So, okay. I'll just give you a little basics of some of the things, and that's the reason why I've put this picture here. Can we all see the MR image that is there on my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Right. Though I wanted to start off with CT, but there are certain basic concepts about the MR which tend to confuse us sometimes, and that is why I put in this MR picture. Now, this MR picture here is of the brain, and we know that usually the MR pictures are either T1 or T2. Believe me, the number of sequences that exist now in the world of MRI is humongous. And at least for me, who's not a radiologist, but just an otologist, a lateral skull base surgeon who has some extra interest in otology, to remember all those sequences is absolutely out of the question. But something very, very basic, that we know that on T2, the CSF is bright. But beyond that, is there anything else which can help me in differentiating a T2 image, a T2 weighted image? Now, the first thing, good, it's very good that I myself made this mistake. Whenever as an examinee you get an MR image, do not call it a T1 image or a T2 image, please. The term should be T1 weighted image, T2 weighted image. Please remember that. This is very important, especially if the examiner is someone who has a background of radiology, or if there is some amount of radiology involved in what is being asked to you. If you just call it a T2 image, it's actually wrong, because every image in itself is in totality a T1 and a T2 image on an MR. So get into the habit of calling it a T2 weighted image, because that is where the T2 based tissues become more prominent, or the T2 based features become more prominent, and vis-a-vis the T1 weighted images. Now, we all know that on a T2 weighted image, the CSF is bright, correct? It is hyper intense. Again, on an MRI, it's the intensity. On a CT scan, it's the density. I used to make this mistake previously, and once in a while, even now, while making a presentation, while I'm in the flow of my talk, I make this mistake. You cannot use the word intensity in a CT scan, and you cannot use the word density in an MRI. So you have a hyper intense signal, an iso intense signal, and a hypo intense signal on an MR. Similarly, on a CT scan, it's an iso dense, hyper dense, and hypo dense signal or an image. So on an MR, we know that the CSF, these are the ventricles. So we will not go into the details of the physics of the MR, because that is beyond the subject and beyond the purview of this talk, but still, and as I said, the MR sequences are so humongous in number that it's absolutely impossible for us ENT specialists to at least remember all of them. Anyway, so to come back, this is the ventricle which is filled with CSF. So the moment we see this image, we say that it's a T2 weighted image. Fair enough. But there can be some T2 weighted images wherein the CSF might be dark. Right? Can you see the CSF dark here? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can see.
Yes. So this is the ventricle. Okay. See, look at the right side. This is also T2, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? This is also T2, and this was also T2.
Yes, sir.
So how come on one T2 the CSF is dark, and on the other T2 the CSF is rather hyper intense and iso intense, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the because there are certain images called the FLAIR images, FLAIR, fluid attenuated inversion recovery images. Those are the images wherein the CSF can be dark, but the T2 weight is maintained. So how do I know whether the image is a T2 weighted image or a T1 weighted image? For that, what we need to see is we need to see the cortex of the brain. We all know that in the brain, we have the gray matter and the white matter, correct? Now, the gray matter is more on the surface and the sulci and the gyri, whereas the white matter is deep inside. Okay. Now, let's take a proper T1 image first and look at it. Just give me a minute. Yes. Now look at this T1 image. This is the gray matter. My cursor here. Okay.
Yes.
This is the white matter. Is the contrast good enough for you to understand or appreciate the difference between the so-called color here? I'm using the very wrong term, but still I'm using it. Can you see the color of the gray matter and the color of the white matter? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Now on a T1 image, the gray matter appears grayer and the white matter appears whiter, which means that it follows the way it is in the brain. Okay, So if the gray matter appears gray and the white matter appears white, forget the CSF. The CSF is hypointense. Forget the CSF. It is a T1 weighted image. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
So if the gray matter on the sulci and the gyri on the surface of the brain is gray, gray is gray, and white is white, one weighted image. Now let's go back to what's happening here. Can you see how the gray matter on the surface is appearing more white than the white matter which is appearing dark? Can we appreciate this difference?
Yes, sir.
Correct? So if the gray matter appears whiter than the white matter, it's a T2 weighted image irrespective of what the CSF says. So can we see the same thing here? Yes. Here, look on the right side, it's a T2 weighted image. Okay. But the CSF is black. But I could have thought if I remove this from here. If I remove this from here, I could have thought that it's a T1 weighted image. Yes, no. But what is the condition of the gyri and the sulci and the white matter here? The gyri and the sulci are whiter, and the gray matter and the white matter is grayer. So this definitely is a T2 weighted image. But it's a T2 weighted image wherein the CSF is dark. It's not hyper intense, it's hypointense. So it's a flare image. These are the three main sequences that one has to know as an ENT specialist, because flare images are very, very common and popular in the posterior fossa. Okay. So just because I'm probably sounding repetitive, just because the CSF is dark, it does not make it a T1 image. So if I bring back the annotations, I can see it's a T2 image with dark fluid, where the CSF is dark, and that's because of something called a flare sequence. As I said, fluid attenuated inversion recovery sequence. So this is the reason I wanted to start off with this, so that I don't forget this later on. And this is extremely important, irrespective of whether you are an ENT specialist or whether you are a radiologist, because as ENT specialists, especially when we get MRs in our hand, whether it's for the anterior fossa, whether it's for a CSF leak or an anterior fossa tumor or a posterior fossa lesion, we tend to get a little shaky, which is absolutely acceptable and understandable. So this is the first thing that you need to know. And as I am repeatedly saying, do not say it's a T1 image. T1 weighted, T2 weighted. Don't ever think, get into the habit. Don't think that the other person is not a radiologist. So what will he know about a T1 or a T2 weighted image? I can always use the term, but it's a matter of habit. Okay. Now let's start with things simpler. Let's start with the CT scans. Okay. So again, the first thing that most of the time we want to know is whether it's a bone window. The first thing that people tend to ask is, sir, is this bone window or is this soft tissue window? Okay. So when the bone appears whiter, it is not a bone window. Okay. Another small trick, when the bone appears hyper intense, look at this image and look at this image. Does everyone agree here that the bone here is much more hyper intense compared to the bone here? Yes, no? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
So, but this is not, this is actually the bone window and not this. This is the soft tissue window. Okay. So now let's look at this. The other thing that can help you not necessarily always, especially if you are being asked to see an image on the DICOM viewer, is if you look at the right side. If you look at the right side, it tells you what is the resolution, what is the level of the sections. These are 0.6 millimeter cuts, and this is with contrast. This is with contrast. Because it is with contrast, you can see these vasculatures here, the sinuses here, that's the transverse sinus and the lateral sinus, which has become prominent. You can actually, I'm not sure how good the resolution is, but you can actually see the blood vessels also. You can see the basilar artery here. Okay. So anyway, so this is what a bone window looks like compared to, yes, exactly, compared to a soft tissue window. Again, because this soft tissue window is with contrast, we can actually see these vessels all lighted up. These blood vessels all lighted up, right? So this is a soft tissue window with contrast. Even on a plate, if you're given an image on the view box, usually the dictum is that if you look at the right or the left, wherever this detail is given, you would find either the word contrast written, or you would find an annotation which says plus C. Plus C. Okay. So that helps you. Don't just jump into the scan. Again, the same thing, you know. Yes, obviously during your exam, you will not be given the entire series. You will be given one image. So we have to discount that possibility that we might make a mistake as far as sort of, you know, making a wrong diagnosis is concerned, because as I have always told in my lectures, imaging is all about serial studies. If one image could suffice, why would the radiologists unnecessarily spend, I mean, sheets of the films and send you 4 plates or 5 plates or 7 plates or whatever? If one image could suffice and give you the entire diagnosis at one go, why would people send you CDs, or why would you ask for CDs with 1,000+ images? Because they have to be read sequentially. Anyway, so the thing is that before you go here, look here. There's a lot that you can garner from here. So if it's, for example, look at this, it says LARP. Now in today's world, one really does not have to you know, tell students or junior residents or youngsters just starting out on their practice as to which is the left side and which is the right side. Everyone is literally, I mean, it's a reflex action. It's a reflex action. It doesn't even need your cognitive senses. I mean, you see a scan and you know that this is the left side of the patient and this is the right side of the patient, because we're looking at the scan from the foot end. And obviously the nose is anterior and the head and the occiput is posterior, or whichever way it is. But there was a time when true coronals were done, and instead of hyperflexion, the patient was put into a prone position. The patient was put into a prone position for the true coronals. At that point of time, in fact, way about maybe 20 years ago or 18 years ago, there was a paper in publication in Laryngoscope. Mistakes made in the interpretation, especially of coronal CT-PNS. The mistakes that were made in side determination, because at that point of time, since the reformatted images were not very popular, since not everyone had a new gantry with reformatted images, not everyone could do the entire scan with the patient supine in a comfortable position. And because every patient could not hyperextend their neck, sometimes they would do the coronals in the prone position, as a result of which the left actually became the right and the right actually became the left. But these days, you really don't need to bother about that. You are always reading the scans from the foot end. So you are always reading the scans from the foot end. So obviously the right hand of the patient is this side and the left hand of the patient is this side. And you need not be told that the nose is always anterior in human beings. What you see additionally here around here are again not that I'm also very much aware of, but some of them are to stabilize the head and also what is called the head coil, right? So we will not go into all that. Now, given an image like this, okay, given an image like this, what is it that you might, what is the information that you might garner? What is it that you might, suppose you are just asked, you're just left on your own and you're randomly told to describe this scan. So obviously you start off with number one, what is the section that you see? So it's an axial section, right? We know we have either an axial or a coronal or the oblique sagittal. So by now we all know that this is an axial section. You might say of the head, because we're not just seeing the temporal bone, we are seeing other parts as well. We're seeing the nose, we're seeing the nasal pyramid, we're seeing the sinuses, we're seeing the base of the skull and whatnot. So axial section, CT, HRCT, high resolution. Why am I saying high resolution? Because I know it's 0.6 millimeter, and if I've already seen contrast, I might as well add post contrast. Now the examiner asks you, why are you saying contrast? What makes you think it's a contrast? The annotations mention here that it's a contrast, but don't jump the gun and tell the examiner that I can see the blood vessels and the sinuses here, unless and until you are asked to. But if this says contrast here on the film, there is no harm in mentioning it. Sir, I can see contrast written here. So post contrast axial CT scan of the head. Now try to imagine at what level it might have been taken. That's a very important reference point. That's a very important reference point, because the next question from the examiner, if you don't say the level, if you don't ascertain the level, the examiner will ask you, so when you say the head, is it the calvarium or is it the atlanto-occipital junction or is it the mid-cerebral level? Where? Now, the unfortunate part over here in this particular scan is, and this is a fight that I keep having with my radiology friends here, as you can see that the scan is not perfectly aligned. When I say it's not perfectly aligned, what I mean is, while here you see one set of structures, on the other side you see some totally different set of structures. This is a pretty bad scan done. While here you see the vertical carotid, internal carotid artery, here you see the horizontal internal carotid artery. What kind of a scan is it? It's a very bad scan as far as the alignment of the patient is concerned. Anyway, the point is, you're not there to argue with your examiner. So you might say, if you look at this, you see the basal turn of the cochlea and you also see the vestibule. So you can easily say, sir, this is an axial, a post-contrast axial HRCT axial section at the level of the vestibule. That's it. So you have now created a scenario for yourself wherein you have put in a reference. So your question, and so if you do not mention anything beyond what is visible at that level, you will not be held responsible. So try to ascertain what the level is. Say, for example, let's look at this and let's just concentrate on the left side in order to get our reference point. So, sir, this is an axial CT scan, post-contrast axial CT scan of the head, mainly focusing on the temporal region taken at the level of the superior upper part of the superior semicircular canal. Are we all on the same page here? Yes, no? Hello?
Yes, sir. We are on the same page, sir. Your
And
voice is little bit crackly, sir.
yeah, I can also feel that. Is there anything that we can do about it?
No, sir. I think we can continue, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
just give me a minute. Just give me a second.
yes, sir.
I'll try and attach my microphone.
Yes, sir. Yes.
इतना बेकार रील है।
Is it any better, Dr. Pratik?
Yes, sir, it is better, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, it's better, sir.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Dr.
Sir.
Pratik?
Yes, sir, it's better, sir.
Hello?
Sir, it's better, sir.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I think the microphone is not working because I kept saying hello. I did not get a response. So I suppose the microphone is not working.
Yes, sir. So you can continue like this only, sir. No problem.
And is this the manner that you want it to be?
Exactly, sir. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So,
Sir, can you please repeat the bone section, the bone window and the soft tissue window? Because
yeah.
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Thank you so much.
Right. See, it's very simple. It's not rocket science. We are not here to understand the physics behind CT and MR. That's for the radiologists. Correct? It's as simple. When the bone appears brighter, is the bone brighter here or not? Do we agree on that? Hello. Can't hear. I think the connection is pretty bad today.
Yes, sir. It's brighter, sir.
Yeah. So this bone is much more shinier. I mean, there's more glare, correct? Compared to this. Okay?
Yes, sir.
But this is the bone window. Not this. Just because the bone is glarier, that's not the bone window.
Okay, sir.
The image that you see now is the bone window image. And the image that you see now is I'll just show you something. 1 minute. Give me a minute. Can you see this picture?
No, sir. We are seeing the same picture, sir. You have to.
I'll have to stop sharing and come back to this.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, 1 minute. Can you see it now?
Correct, sir. You can see.
Just forget what this bone algorithm. Let's not get into all that because then this lecture is going to become a marathon lecture, right?
Yes, sir.
See this. What does it say here? Brain window. What does this say? Bone window. Okay?
Correct, sir.
So in the brain window, the bone is more shinier than the bone actually in the bone window. Okay? Are we clear now? Just forget this part, please. Just forget this part. We are not going to go into the algorithm part, please. Okay? But if you look at both these images, and if you look at both these images, okay?
Yes, sir.
And if you look at the bone, this bone is shining. It's not very pleasing to the eyes, is it? No. But the bone is very, very bright. This is how I remember. When the bone is very bright, it's not the bone window. Full stop. When the bone is soothing to the eyes, it's the bone window. Does that help?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We understood, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is the voice better now?
Sir, little bit better, sir.
Not much. Actually, I told you, ever since that hurricane thing happened here,
yes,
our net connections all gone for a toss. Even after almost a month, we are with very bad net connections. Anyway, I just hope I can do whatever I can. So please remember this. Please remember this. Whether it's with contrast, without contrast is something different. We are not getting into the contrast business right now. But I want you to remember for this for the rest of your life, that when the bone is hitting your eye, it is not the bone window. When the bone is soothing, it's the bone window. Clear?
Clear, sir.
Now have we gone back to the screen for the Radiance viewer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So And most of the time, to be very honest, most of the time when we see CT temporal, it's usually the bone window that we are seeing. With or without contrast is something else. Okay, it's usually we see the bone window because the bone is soothing here. Once again, for the last time, bone, I'm not liking the image, but this is not the bone window, though the bone is brighter. But this is the bone window for me. Okay.
Yes.
But just because it's the bone window does not mean that it cannot have good soft tissue differentiation. It has better bone differentiation. That is what it means, especially at the interface. Especially at the interface. See what is happening here. Look at the same image. See this interface. Can you see my cursor? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
This interface
Sir,
between bones. Hello.
Sir, we are not able to see the radiant viewer, sir.
Not able to see the radiant viewer.
Yes, sir. We have to share it again, sir.
Achha.
We are still seeing the bone window and brain window image.
Okay. I don't know what's wrong today. Now?
Yes, sir. We can see.
So, see, it is the interface which matters. Do you see this bone and soft tissue interface? Yes. Now,
Yes,
this
sir.
interface is not very sharp, is it? No. Let's look at the same over here. It's the same thing, you know. We see the mastoid air cells here. This is the posterior face of the petrous bone, temporal bone. So we see that the differentiation between the soft tissue, that is the intracranial tissue, and the bone is not as good as it is over here. So that is why this is, but over here, see how nice and sharp is the delineation of the bone from the soft tissue. Whether there is soft tissue differentiation in the bone itself is again not the point of discussion right now, correct? Yes, no,
Yes,
hello.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this is for the last time. This is the bone window. Just give me an answer in the chat. Is there any confusion regarding the bone window?
Sir, I actually asked. So we are getting the answer. No confusion.
No confusion.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Right. Because you know this is one very simple thing wherein everyone tends to make a mistake. Array, is this bone window? Is this bone window? Is this soft tissue window? No, this is bone window. Now someone's requested to show them a bone window without contrast. So that could be a little difficult because I actually opened up a series where the contrast was important. So let me see if during the course I can show you. I'm sure we have other images. So let's not worry about what is happening inside now. As I said, axial scan of the head, concentrating on the temporal bone, preferably a bone window, taken at the level of either I can say the basal turn of the cochlea. When you can see the cochlea, always refer to the cochlea, please. Always. That's the usual dictum. Or you can even say taken at the level of the posterior semicircular canal. But the problem with the posterior semicircular canal is that it could be a superior end or an inferior part, correct? But the cochlea, the best part is you can say at the level of the basal turn of the cochlea. Always try to give a reference point, okay? And then you can elaborate from there. And then you can elaborate from there. How long do you usually get to stay on a station, Dr. Prateek?
Sir, it's usually 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, so obviously you can't waste that 5 minutes telling the examiner that you can see the septum, you can see the maxillary sinus, and you can see, no, you obviously have to jump straight into the pathology, correct, if I'm right?
Correct.
Unless and until you feel that you've been actually given a normal CT scan and you're just being asked to play around with the normal CT scan,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, but just to give you an idea, so you can always say that this is the left side and this is the right side. We can actually see the mastoid antrum with the periantral air cells. This is the basal turn of the cochlea. This is the posterior semicircular canal. On the left side, I can see such and such structures. And whatever you need to say, I can see the tympanic bone, I can see the mandibular condyle in the glenoid fossa, I can see the same on the other side, I can see the greater wing of the sphenoid and the clivus and the basiclivus and things like that. I can see the occiput. But then we need to jump into the pathology. Okay. Now, before we come into the pathology, once again, what is the reference point for the density? What is the reference point for the density? The reference point for the density is the brain. So whatever is similar in density to the brain is called isodense. Whatever is lower in intensity, which means a negative image, is called hypodense. And whatever is more in density is hyperdense. So do we have structures here other than the brain which are hyperdense or hypodense and isodense? Yes, we do. The brain itself is isodense. The bone is hyperdense, whereas the mastoid air cells and the air in the external auditory canal or the maxillary antri or in the nasal pathway is hypodense. Clear? Okay. And what else can be isodense? The marrow within the bone is isodense. The muscles and the soft tissues are isodense, but in this particular scan, the vessels are not, because it's a contrast scan and we can see all these small blood vessels. So don't comment about that over here. Okay. So we have hyperdense, which is the bone. We have isodense, which is the brain and most of the soft tissues. And finally, we have hypodense, which is the air. Correct? And in the biggest problem we know with CT is very poor soft tissue differentiation. So we are not getting into that now. Now, what happens if I'm given, I'll stop the share now because the folder that I'm opening has a lot of, it is already marked. So I don't want you to see see what image I'm putting on screen. Okay. So let me choose an image for you. Okay. Let's correct. Fine. I'll share my screen with you now. Can you see the image?
Yes, sir.
Now see, something that I was saying. Where is the L written here?
On the wrong side. Yes, sir.
You say it's the wrong side. They used to say it's the right side.
It's right.
Because the patient is in a prone position.
Correct, correct, correct.
And it's way back in 2008. But this says L on the left on this side. So don't assume. Your examiner might be tricking you. He or she, they might put in an old image.
Correct,
so don't assume. Assumption is the mother of all dash ups. Okay.
Yes.
So don't assume in life. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And see, does this say plain study?
Yes, sir.
So this is bone window. Yes, because the different, see, it's a very old scan, correct? But I intentionally put it here so I can make you understand this difference between left and right. So do not compare the resolution quality of this image. This was probably an 8 slice machine or a 16 slice machine. This is way back in 2008. Yes. Okay, we are in 2020 now. Right. So, but still, this is a bone window. And there was this lady who had asked me to show us bone window without contrast. So this is what one of the images might look like. So now let's try and describe this image. Okay. Now let's try and describe this image. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say that this is an image of the head because I'm not seeing the entire head or the brain. What am I going to say? Sir, ma'am, this is an and I'm not going to use the term HRCT because it's a pretty old scan. It's a CT scan of the left temporal bone, probably the bone window sequence, coronal section of the left side, showing the presence of an iso-intense. This intensity here matches the intensity of the brain, right? So this is iso-intense. This is hyper, hypo, iso, hyper, hypo, iso. So a iso dense. See, again I made that mistake. Not intense. Iso dense shadow in the left attic and mastoid region, extending towards the additus and the anterior attic, surrounding the ossicles from all the sides and extending into the round oval window area. Okay. Beyond that, you can also say, if you want, as I said, put in a level. So a left-sided CT coronal section of the left temporal bone at the level of the beginning of the basal turn of the cochlea, or at the level of the vestibule, showing whatever I mentioned earlier. Besides that, what we can also normally see, if you feel that the scrotum is eroded here, mention it. If you don't feel it's eroded, don't mention it. What you can definitely mention here is that we are not seeing any bony trabeculations here. So it has probably eroded. Most of the time, you have to again get used to using the word probably, simply because you are being given a single image from a C. See, it's the 23rd sequence. And the images, sometimes it's also sometimes written 1/25, 1/190, which means you are being given one image out of 190. So probably eroding the trabeculations between the mastoid air cells, probably eroding the stapes superstructure. Do not give a diagnosis, therefore cholesteatoma. No, 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 no. Neither CT nor MR can give you a diagnosis of cholesteatoma. It's an iso-dense pathological shadow, full stop. Let the examiner ask you, what could it be? Again, there. One more thing, Dr. Pratik, look. What's the thickness of sorry, no, not this one, that's another one, sorry.
Yes,
this is this 5 centimeters is the scale here, so in case you wish to measure something, sorry, I was wrong. Yeah, so let the examiner ask you, so doctor, what do you think is the pathology? Well, sir, unless and until we know the clinical history and at least some of the clinical findings of the patient, it is very difficult to ascertain the actual pathology. But it could be one of the destructive lesions of the temporomastoid area. The most common being cholesteatoma. Weigh your words. I know it's very easy for me to say now. I mean, it's always this pleasure of having to see students suffer and become nervous when you are touching. I mean, you've been out of all this for more than 20 years, but we need to develop this habit, because this can be cholesteatoma. This could be a simple effusion which has been there for a long time. This could be it could be an abscess in the forming, which could actually erode the trabeculations within the mastoid air cells. If the trabeculations were maintained, then the chances of it being an effusion would have been more, because effusion will not usually cause erosion of the trabeculations within the mastoid air in the mastoid air system, the cellular system. The other pathology, which though chronic might not cause there are three pathologies basically, which I always think of when I see an isodense shadow in the mastoid, but the mastoid trabeculations are cellular system trabeculations are well maintained. It's well maintained, and that is A. I'll again stop sharing the screen because I don't want to give out the pathologies. So A is simple effusion, B is granulation, and C is Cox. This is a pathologically confirmed patient of Cox who I had operated upon. So can you see the trabeculations maintained here? Yes?
Yes, sir.
But you can see the isodense shadow. Normally it should have been what? Hypodense, because the air cells are supposed to be hypodense, but they
Yes.
are not. So we can see this whole soft tissue extending even here. And see, though this entire soft tissue is totally surrounding the incus and the long process, can you still make out the stapes here? So this has not eroded the stapes either. Because what I have seen from the 2 or 3 cases of Cox granulomatous disease or the mastoid that I've dealt with is, it's a very hard, gritty, caseous material which tends to be everywhere, but it tends to cause very less destruction. This patient did not even have a perforation actually. This patient did not have a perforation. She was a 17-year-old girl, young girl. She had bilateral Cox mastoiditis, and it bled like anything when I tried removing all this. So anyway, once again, HRCT or CT temporal, but this is the right side, mind you, this time. This is not the left side anymore, okay? Of the right temporal bone, coronal section showing at the level of the beginning of the basal turn of the cochlea, showing an isodense shadow occupying the entire middle ear cavity or the mesotympanum, extending into the hypotympanum, and then extending backwards posteriorly and superiorly through the attic and through the adductus into the attic and the mastoid air cell system, with maintenance of the trabeculations of the mastoid air cell system, completely surrounding the ossicles but not showing any gross evidence of ossicular destruction or discontinuity. Okay. If then the examiner asks you what else, then you can say, sir, besides that, the normal anatomical structures that are visible include the superior semicircular canal, the lateral semicircular canal, the basal turn of the cochlea, the internal auditory canal, blah, 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 blah. All that we've all discussed earlier in our previous lectures. And what else should we expect here? If we see the long process, the body of the incus, and how do we know the body of the incus? All my friends who've attended the webinar on the coronal temporal organized by Dr. Sriharsha would remember, what is the long axis of this particular shadow that you are seeing? Is it vertically oriented or is it obliquely oriented? Answers in the chat, please. Answers in the chat, please. Is it vertically oriented or is it obliquely oriented? This shadow that we see here. I'll wait. Answers in the chat, please.
Obliquely placed, sir. Because
absolutely.
Yes.
Right. So remember, if it is oblique, it's the body of the incus, and if it is vertical, it's the head of the malleus. I can't show you each and every representative slide. Otherwise, as I said, this would become a marathon session, and probably Dr. Sriharsha is going to spend all his money on this webinar alone. So this is obliquely oriented. So but always keep, keep the word probably very handy. Keep the word probably very handy. So what else should we see here? If this is the body, the long process, incudostapedial joint, the probably the old oval window, shouldn't we be seeing the facial nerve here? So this is where the facial nerve is. Can everyone see the cursor? Is it clear? Is the cursor visible? The arrow visible? Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible.
So this is the facial nerve here. But unfortunately, the soft tissue is surrounding the tympanic segment of the facial nerve in such a manner that we are unable to know. Why do we know? Why do we know that this is the facial nerve? Because remember once again, if Dr. Sriharsha can provide the axial and the coronal temporal bone videos to the friends, to our friends here, you see a depression on the underneath of the lateral semicircular canal. So this is the lateral semicircular canal, and this is the depression underneath the lateral semicircular canal. Remember, A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D. It's a chain. It's a chain. You identify two structures confidently. I can assure you, friends, you will identify the other structures with equal confidence. Just try and identify 2 or 3 structures in the entire image, which you are very confident. So this is the lateral semicircular canal. So right underneath the lateral semicircular canal is this depression which actually lodges or houses the facial nerve. But because the shadow here is isodense and the facial nerve body itself is supposed to be isodense, we do not see a differentiation, though there are instances wherein this differentiation can be seen. This differentiation can be seen, and I'll show you that. Okay, Dr. Prateek, which screen are you seeing right now?
So the temporal bone screen, sir. Image.
The single image,
See?
not the presentation screen.
No, sir. No, sir.
Now?
So you have to reshare it, I think.
Oh, why is this happening today? I mean, earlier we could just do it with the Alt tab. Why is this happening today? Anyway.
Sir, you have to do the complete screen sharing. Then it would work, sir.
How do you do the complete screen sharing then? Just tell me, because that will make life easier for me and for the rest of the people as well.
So for if you go to the screen share, sir, there are 3 options, sir. One is advanced option also, the second tab. In there you can select share complete screen.
Advanced, but doesn't show portion of screen, music or sound.
Portion of screen, sir. So you can select portion of screen and then expand it to fit the whole screen, sir. There will be a green. So green borders will be there, and you have to expand it. That's it.
So that way I can keep shifting between screens, yes, and it will show you all of them?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now you can see it?
Now we can see, sir.
Do you see a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so look at this. It's the same kind of a pathology, right? It's the same kind of a pathology, wherein obviously not that extensive, but what I'm trying to show you here is that once in a while, obviously this is more obvious in the anterior part of the facial nerve, the tympanic segment of the facial nerve, but you can see the bone over the facial nerve. Let me see, I think I had one more. No. Anyway, so if you can see bone along the lateral edge, or if we go back to the previous image, if you do not, if you need to see bone here for you to say whether it's dehiscent or not. So are we back on the image now?
So we are back.
Yeah. So in this particular, I mean, if I actually had the DICOM viewer, I could have zoomed in over here and then made, tried and make a comment whether I can see a thin rim of bone here. But if you don't comment on the fact that the facial nerve is dehiscent or not dehiscent. But the fact of the matter is that this depression that we see on the undersurface of the lateral semicircular canal is actually the area of the facial nerve of the tympanic segment of the facial nerve. Okay. So once again, I'll stop sharing the screen because I don't want to give out the pathology. And okay. I suppose I'll just keep working the normal way because, yeah. Right. So far we were talking about the coronal sections. Now let's take an axial section. Once again, axial section of the, you can see R written here. Okay, you can see R written here, and obviously you know that this is the right side, but you've just reconfirmed the fact that this is not a mirror image. So you see the R written here and you see L written here. So the axial high resolution axial CT scan of the right temporal bone showing an isodense shadow in the right mastoid antrum extending anteriorly and causing erosion of the bone over the lateral aspect of the lateral semicircular canal. Okay, so this is what you need to say as far as at the level, I mean, if again the level, at the level, axial CT scan at the level of the lateral semicircular canal. In fact, you can actually see the entire signet ring appearance of the lateral semicircular canal. This is the entire signet ring appearance. So an axial CT scan of the right temporal bone at the level of the right lateral semicircular canal, demonstrating an isodense shadow occupying the right mastoid antrum and extending anteriorly, causing an erosion over of the outer aspect of the right lateral semicircular canal. So over here, you can push your luck and put in a diagnosis of a lateral semicircular canal fistula. There is no doubt about the fact that this is a case of a lateral semicircular canal fistula. Okay, but we don't know what the pathology is, because again, I mean, a lateral semicircular canal fistula is not the property or the jamindari of a cholesteatoma. Any other destructive pathology, again, the moment I uttered the word destructive, my mind went back to the fact that I do not see the intercellular trabeculations or the septae here. So it is a destructive process, and something which can destroy the most dense bone in the human body is obviously a destructive process. So of the left lateral of the right lateral semicircular canal, okay, causing a fistula of the right lateral semicircular canal. Pathology, once again, sir, unless and until I have the clinical background, the symptomatology and the signs, it's very difficult to say. But considering the fact that most of the time we are dealing with patients of cholesteatoma, probably it's a case of cholesteatoma causing a right lateral semicircular canal fistula. Now for fistula, this is a very, very obvious fistula, but for a fistula, remember, on an HRCT, how much of an of the CT that we see is actually an HRCT, God only knows. I mean, I've specifically mentioned, this is obviously 10-15 years back. Now hardly are such scenarios occurring, but in spite of that, I've actually mentioned that I want an HRCT temporal bone for a lateral, for a fistulous communication with the labyrinth. I never mentioned that I'm specifically looking for a lateral semicircular canal fistula. No. I just mentioned query labyrinthine fistula, and yet I get scans which are maybe 1 millimeter apart or 1.5 millimeter apart, which is absolutely not acceptable. Not acceptable. Anyway, as per standard textbooks, on an axial section, for you to be absolutely sure that yes, there is a fistulous communication between the pathology and the labyrinth, it has to be present on three, not one, not two, not one, not two, but three contiguous scans. Three contiguous scans, you have to have an erosion of the bone over the lateral aspect or over any aspect of the labyrinth for you to say that yes, this is a fistula for sure. Besides that, you can see the posterior semicircular canal. You can actually see the vestibular aqueduct here. You can see the vestibular aqueduct here. You can see the internal auditory canal. You can very faintly, if you want, you can actually see the shadow of the facial nerve. This is the petrous apex with the marrow. This is the posterior fossa. This is the middle cranial fossa. So if the examiner asks you, okay, doctor, what do you think about the integrity of the tegmen? Sir, I think that the tegmen is well maintained, and you point this out. I think, sir, that the tegmen is well maintained. Otherwise, normally, if there was an erosion on an axial scan, the tegmen erosion is obviously better visualized on a coronal scan, but on an axial scan, it is this bone that you need to pay attention to. So if this bone is eroded, then this is an erosion of the tegmen, which is leading to a communication between the middle ear, the mastoid middle ear complex, with the middle cranial fossa. Mind you, this is the middle, the petrous bone here. The petrous bone here is the partition on an axial section between the middle fossa and the posterior fossa. This is by no means the middle fossa. There is no part of the middle fossa here, and there is no part of the posterior fossa here. Okay, so this is middle fossa, this is posterior fossa. So once again, we can also comment whether there is any dehiscence or dehiscence, whatever your favorable pronunciation is, whether there is any dehiscence of the over the sigmoid sinus, or the, I prefer the term, honestly, I prefer the term lateral sinus. So whether there is any dehiscence of the bony plate over the lateral sinus or not. Clear? Dr. Pratik, how are we proceeding? Are we fine?
Yes, sir. We are fine, sir.
Okay. Let's see. Now, same thing, different view, different side. So this is a lateral, this is an HRCT or a CT scan temporal bone, but now on the left side, coronal section taken at the level of the vestibule and the beginning of the basal turn of the cochlea, showing an isodense shadow in the attic and the upper part of the mesotympanum. In the attic and the upper part of the mesotympanum, eroding the bone over the lateral aspect of the left semicircular canal. So this is a fistulous communication, a left lateral semicircular canal fistula, but this is the left side and this is a coronal section. Okay, doctor, what do you think about the tegmen here? Well, sir, the tegmen does seem intact, but I have a bit of a doubt about this area, and unless and until I have the succeeding and the preceding images, it is very difficult for me to say whether the tegmen could have been eroded here or not. Okay, doctor, what do you think is this? Do you think it's the cholesteatoma here? I mean, do you think it is this pathology? Now, we all know it's very difficult for cholesteatoma as such to come out into the external auditory canal. We can always suck it out, but cholesteatoma cannot as such come out into the external. I mean, you don't see it as a mass in the external auditory canal, because normally it is expected that you have examined the patient before sending the patient for a scan and you've done a suction clearance. So this cannot be cholesteatoma. Can this be a granulation polyp, which is a very, very common finding? We do find a polypoidal mass, reddish in color, sometimes scaring the wits out of us for us to consider whether it's a glomus or not, but we do find it in chronic inflammatory processes. No. Because if you look at it, it's got a linear border, and this border is going parallel to the roof of the external auditory canal. So basically what is happening here is that the skin over the external auditory canal wall has thickened because of chronic inflammation. So this is secondary chronic inflammatory soft tissue stenosis. This is chronic. Look at the words. It's very difficult. I can understand it's very difficult at a younger age with a burlesque looking examiner in front of you who's out to eat you up that day, to pay attention to your words. But it's a habit you need to inculcate. It's the habit which differentiates the wheat from the chaff. So this is probably a post-inflammatory or a chronic secondary chronic inflammatory soft tissue stenosis of the external or of the bony part of the external auditory canal. Clear? So this is a chronic inflammatory secondary chronic inflammatory stenosis. Okay, so I'll just stop the screen share once again, and I'll pick up something different for you now. Okay, correct, right. So right now we saw something.
So
I
we are
mean,
not. Yes.
yeah, I didn't start share. I don't want to give. I mean, I am a little bit of a drama baz, So it's okay. So here you can actually see that the bony plate of the sigmoid sinus or the lateral sinus is eroded. So this is just to help you compare with the previous section, previous scan. Okay, this is just to help you compare. In the scan previous to the previous one, wherein we saw the fistula in the lateral semicircular canal on the axial section on the right side, the bone over the lateral sinus was nice and smooth, but here we definitely see an indentation. Dr. Pratik, it's been an hour. I mean, I don't mind continuing, but how long am I supposed to continue?
So you can
you have a
have,
next.
yes, sir. So you can have 10-15 minutes.
So you tell me what, I mean, does this give you a gross idea about CT temporal as to how to describe a CT temporal?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Exactly.
I mean, is this what you wanted?
Yes, sir.
So what is it that you want me to discuss in the next 10 minutes? And I'll try and find images accordingly. Tell me that and I'll do it accordingly.
So we can ask audience.
Yes, absolutely. Let me turn on the chat here.
Yes.
Provided I have it, handy, provided I have it handy.
So the most common questions on CT temporal would be vestibular schwannoma, like bilateral vestibular schwannoma.
Oh, okay. On CT temporal.
CT temporal, yes, sir.
But CT temporal, someone's asking landmarks of the temporal bone. I mean, that's a complete lecture in itself. So
yes,
I'm so sorry, Dr. Vibhor Kumar, but you'll have to look up the videos on the net that we have. I mean, I have some of my videos and there are other videos as well. I mean, just mentioning the landmarks of the temporal bone in its entirety.
Yeah, that would be another.
I mean, it's a lecture in itself. See, Dr. Pratik, as far as vestibular schwannoma is concerned, I mean, I don't do CT scans for vestibular schwannoma. I mean, because that's not the modality, images, that is not the modality of investigation. Okay, we'll go back to what we were discussing before we started the meeting, right?
Yes, sir. So if you have MRI images of vestibular schwannoma.
Yeah. That I'll definitely show. Yes, remember that patient I discussed with you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I'll stop the screen share. Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
And if you can just tell us the facial nerve course on a HRCT temporal bone, that would be sufficient, I think.
Okay. Let me first pick up the, yeah. One minute, please. I'll first pick up the image and then I'll share the screen with you.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Can you see it? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can see, sir.
So this is a huge vestibular schwannoma. Okay, this is a T2 weighted image. This is a T2 weighted image. Why? Because if I go from top to bottom, I can see that the white matter appears gray and the gray matter appears white. So this is a T2 image. Obviously the CSF is hyper intense. So this is, and now it's the term intense. So this is a T2 weighted image, and you can see it in the annotation here. It's a T2 weighted image. And as I go down, I can see a huge vestibular schwannoma. You can always make the measurements here. You can always make the measurements here. So it's about 3.29 centimeters, 3.45 centimeters here, and 2 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters here. So this is a huge vestibular schwannoma. In the left, cerebellopontine angle, and also the left internal auditory canal, which is compressing not only on the brainstem, but also the cerebellar peduncle and causing a midline shift of the ventricle. Okay, so this is an image. See how huge it is. As we go up, you can actually see what we call a supratentorial extension. Okay, so this is a huge vestibular schwannoma, right? This is a huge vestibular schwannoma. This is a T2 image. And if I can show you, okay, I think we are running out of time. So this is a T1 post contrast. This is a T1 post contrast coronal view. Okay, and we know that the vestibular schwannoma takes up the contrast and shows a hyper intense signal, and it's on the left side, and see how it is pushing the brainstem away. So it's majorly pushing the brainstem away. But surprisingly, this, and why do I say post contrast? Look at the blood vessels here. Though this does not say anything over here, it does not. Why is it T1? Why is it T1? Because the CSF is black, though you do not have those images of the sulci and the gyri, but you can see that on contrast, the vestibular schwannoma enhances. On contrast, the vestibular schwannoma has enhanced. Correct? So is this enough for the vestibular schwannoma, Dr. Prateek?
Yes, sir.
I'll just go to that thing about the facial nerve that you asked me. Just give me a minute. I have it in my presentation. I'll show you the entire course of the facial nerve. Yeah, here it is. I'll just stop sharing the screen for a moment, please.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, it depends upon how much of the course of the facial nerve can you see. Well, this is an excellent image where besides the mastoid segment, you are actually seeing all the parts of the facial nerve. Obviously not the intracanalicular part, the cisternal part, because that's visible on an MRI. So you can see the labyrinthine segment here. You can see the labyrinthine segment here. You can see the tympanic segment from there, this anterior end to the posterior end, and then it's going to turn downwards inferiorly to form the second genu. You can see the geniculate ganglion here. You can see the geniculate ganglion here formed by the labyrinthine segment and the backward turn, and then the tympanic segment. And not only that, you can actually see the canal for the greater superficial petrosal nerve. And we know that the labyrinthine segment lies between the vestibule posteriorly and the cochlea, basal turn of the cochlea anteriorly. So this is as far as the image of the facial nerve on an axial section, the entire course of the facial nerve is concerned. This is the course of the entire facial nerve only in the tympanic segment. If you look here, you can actually faintly see the shadow of the lateral semicircular canal. So we know that the tympanic segment of the facial nerve comes in close contact with the lateral semicircular canal. And for the mastoid segment, you actually have to look at the I'll go back to the, yeah, you actually have to look at the coronal sections. So this is the coronal section of the left side, and you can see the second genu, you can see the entire mastoid segment, and you can even see the stylomastoid foramen, whereas the same segment appears at a circular shadow on the axial section. So this is the entire facial nerve of the mastoid segment. So for you to see the mastoid segment in its entirety, you need the coronal. Remember, parallel, perpendicular, entirety, circular. Remember those philosophies clearly, and you'll not make a mistake. So for the mastoid segment, coronal. For the rest of the segments, axial. What else, Dr. Pratik, or should we stop now?